First of all, Andy, thank you for giving me the opportunity to have this conversation, and thank you for creating this platform for these conversations, these open conversations to happen in a safe space. I think we are in an interesting time where, things that have been systemic in the advertising media industry are now being looked at with a closer eye, and I feel a difference this time around where it feels like there's real efforts that are going to be made to actually change some of those things in the industry. My experience in this industry has been a mixed one, and I feel fortunate to be able to have had the type of career that I have. But as you said, it has come along with a lot of baggage, a lot of pain, and a lot of experiences that aren't the same for others who are not people of color. Or an underrepresented minority in the industry. I was fortunate that when I started out at Microsoft, the team I started on client services operations, we were building, a search, sales, and service business, was a diverse team. It was a very diverse team, including as part of the leadership. And so for me, coming into the industry that way back in 2005, I was incredibly lucky to be able to see other leaders at Microsoft, see leaders and managers in the organization that I was in who were people of color, and that allowed me to, as they say, see what I could be. And so that helped me a lot in having the foundation that I have right now, and I'm grateful for all the folks who were allies who looked past skin color and race and looked at potential and talent. The interesting thing for me is that I came into this industry not knowing anything, not having any experience out of grad school, and what was required of the folks hiring me was that they looked at my transferable skill set, and that's a lot of what's needed now. Since that point, it's unfortunate to say that the diversity that I've seen in other companies and other roles have not been quite the same as it was when I started. And I know from speaking to other people of color in this industry, especially as we're moving through the ranks, it gets less and less as you move up, and you don't have the same peer set, you don't have the same person who looks like you, either as you're reporting to them or sitting in the rooms. I've sat in a lot of rooms and a lot of meetings throughout my career, and most of the time I am the only or one of very, very few people who look like me, or even people who are of color or are underrepresented minorities. So there is a lot of change that needs to happen in the industry. You asked about some of the experiences I've had. It's been lonely, for a lot of us, and even as we rise in our careers and we've had success, it doesn't mean that we're not carrying a little bit of seeing the differences between how we are treated. The expectations on us are slightly different. We're not always allowed to fail the way others have been allowed to fail, and so you feel this pressure to almost be perfect every time. I've been fortunate that I've had good allies and leaders at the companies I've worked at, where I've been allowed to make mistakes, learn from those mistakes, and that is a big part of what has allowed me to grow. So there's a lot of change that needs to happen in the industry. People really need to understand and empathize and try to understand what it is like for those of us who are sitting in the room and not seeing anyone else that looks like us. When we look at our leadership, both our manager and all the way up in our divisions, we're not seeing a lot of folks who look like us, and so it limits our frankly our confidence that we can do our best and be rewarded and grow in our career, and that will be enough in the organization because we see these as limitations. On a personal level, as a black man, no one, when I'm walking around and I step out of the office or virtually step outside, the world only sees me as a black man. They don't know anything about me, and unfortunately, the negative sort of racial stereotypes and assumptions that have been made about black people in this country, frankly, since the time of slavery, applies to me also. So I feel the same level of anxiety, I feel the same level of worry, I feel the same level of fear as any other black person, especially black man, who are being shot in the streets, and black women are being killed also. I don't want to sort of take away from that, but we see it happening all the time, and it affects us, and it affects our mental state when we go in and we have to deliver, especially when you are in certain positions. You have to learn to compartmentalize that, and that's unfortunate, and you have to be able to move and still deliver. This isn't new. 2014, we saw, a similar, situation, and there was a lot of spotlight on, the Garner case and many other cases at that time. And we had to work through that. We had to still come into the office with that pain, with that anxiety, especially for myself who, I have children. I worry about my son and the world both of them in the world that they're going to grow up in. So it's really a challenging experience when being black and having to deal with and see what's happening with the racial. You're happy that people are finally opening their eyes to what's happening, and real change seems like, I'm hopeful that real change will be made, and we're starting to see some good signs. But it's also important, as we're talking about the advertising industry, that the industry realizes that it is not exempt from what is happening, and it has a major part to play in what's happening. $360 billion in advertising is funding content, it's funding ads, it's funding creative that sends a certain message that either says, hey, I don't see myself in this advertising, it's not for me, and we're expected to just come along for the ride as a consumer, or it sends sometimes a stereotypical version of who black people are and what we represent. And so brands have an incredible amount of power to change this, and we see bright spots all the time where brands are doing this, but it needs to continue and it needs to grow, and not just be a few examples, but it needs to be the systemic change that is needed. And so, when you are whether an executive or other in this industry, and you are black, with everything that's happening, you are affected in that you're expected to still deliver what needs to be delivered for the organization, but you're carrying with you this real life anxiety and fear about what is happening for you and your people. And when will this change, and when will this country recognize our contributions and really provide some equity and opportunity for us?